I've been a reproductive specialist in veterinary medicine for about 37 years. And I've done several thousand breeding soundness evaluations in beef bulls, which is still not close to what some folks like. If you go out west, they do that in a couple of years. So, still not a huge number. But I've done about 4 yaks. So, whatever Greg has brought to me, that's what those are the yak breeding issues that I've seen to this point in my life, and so I don't come to you with any particular expertise in yak reproduction. What I hope to do, I'm learning just like everybody else is here. And what I've tried to do with this little presentation for you is to give you a little bit of basic, maybe male reproductive physiology of the bovine in general, and then try to piece a few things together that I've tried to, some information, mostly from China and India, that I could gather. I do have a really good colleague out at Washington State who's from India, and so when I have yak questions, he's kind of a go-to person for me. But there really isn't a lot of information. There's not a lot of good data sets for us to look at parameters for how fertile is a particular bull, a yak bull. There's really 2 reasons you do a breeding soundness evaluation. One is to determine is the bull like totally infertile? Is he producing sperm at all? And I find that is a really rare occasion. Hardly ever find any bulls, or any males in general, that just they're not producing any sperm cells. What we do see though are subfertility animals. Animals that they're going to get a few cows bred, but they're going to leave a lot open. And then what happens is you string out your breeding season over a long period of time, because there's a refractory period. Once the bull ejaculates and breeds a few cows, then he's got to stop, and he's got to get all the machinery built back up, and then he goes and breeds a few more cows. Highly fertile bulls, their refractory period is very, very short. So they're really consistently impregnating cows very early in a confined season. I don't know how important that is for you all as a breeder, but I think it would be somewhat beneficial to have a confined breeding season. It's going to make your labor a lot less. You're not going to be up for 6 months looking for, say, somebody's calf. You're going to be up for 30 days. And I think, and then that's going to make you more efficient at saving the calves, making sure you're on top of everything, and having good outcomes. I think confined breeding seasons are pretty good. So that's one of the reasons I do. I'm not looking just for infertile bulls. I want to really try to find the highly fertile bulls. So Ted gave you all the genetic information. I'm going to give you some information on the delivery system of that genetic information. And this is one of Greg's bulls, and I'm just always I love their horns. Let's talk real quickly about safety, because I don't think we could go anywhere in a talk about bulls. This doesn't matter whether it's beef bull, yak bulls, it doesn't matter. You have to have some heavy duty equipment. You cannot have subpar equipment and try to collect semen from these animals. They are really, really strong. They'll tear even decent kind of equipment that's just not heavy duty. They'll tear this stuff up. Greg brings his bulls here. He's got good equipment. I think I've collected a bull at your farm, so he has good equipment. We have a little more heavy duty equipment here because we raise bulls. We raise Angus. We have a registered Angus herd here. And so we do a lot of breeding soundness evaluation. But none of this stuff we're talking about today is worth getting killed over. And I know of people, I know of veterinarians, and I know of clients of mine that have been killed by bulls. They can kill you. And these are beef bulls. So I'm kind of thinking that something that's really big and really fast and has huge horns can probably do the same thing. So I would just encourage you that if this is going to be a lifelong thing for you, if this is going to be a long-term investment, here's the first long-term investment you need to have. And that's good heavy-duty piece of equipment to restrain. Squeeze chute. Squeeze chutes are going to help you a lot, rather than just a simple, a head catch mounted to 2 posts, which is very common around in Kentucky for beef cattle. If you do bulls, you need heavy-duty squeeze type equipment. And we have a couple of different things. We actually collected the bulls last time Greg brought them in. We actually used this one because we could drop both sides. And the other thing is collecting yak bulls. They do have a tendency to maybe want to go down on you, and I wanted to make sure we could open up all sides if there was any issues. So. And there's that Dr. Who coming down. His bulls are very adept at manipulating side to side, head side to side to come down through the chutes. I've used all kinds of different equipment over the years. Every style of equipment, manufacturer of equipment, squeeze chutes have good and bad things about them. There are the particular ones that they make for like longhorns and very large horned animals that are kind of V-shaped. They open really wide at the top and then you can close them. Those would certainly be fine. The other thing I would tell you about those types of chutes is they tend to have they open wide at the top, so they're kind of V-shaped. They open wide at the top, and then you close it. The bottom has a little V to it. And if bulls, I've had beef bulls go down in those, and it actually traps. It kind of catches them right here. Now, you'll hear people say, well, they're choking. Well, it really doesn't cut their trachea off. What it does is it pinches their carotids. And they still get hypoxic. I mean, they're still losing air, but it's not because it's right on their trachea. It's because they've pinched their carotids. And you can see the bulls. They're kind of down, and they start doing this, and you're going, oh no, we gotta get them up. So I'm sure that you guys know more about yak bulls than I do, and the equipment that you use. So you may already have really good types of equipment for the way they can get their horns through. These guys get through just kind of regular beef cattle chutes because they just can do their head side to side, and they do a really nice job. I don't know. Did you train them to do that, Greg? But they do a really good job of that. Here's the side panels down. One of the things that I try to do with any breeding sounds evaluation is to do a good physical exam. We always start with a physical exam. Now, this isn't a physical exam like you bring me your puppy dog and we're going to sit up on the table and I'm going to take its heart rate and do all this kind of stuff too. I'm looking really for a couple of things with bulls as far as the physical exam is concerned. One is eyes. Bulls are very visual breeders. Lots of animals we deal with are pheromonal. They smell and they can kind of sniff out the female in heat and other livestock. Again, I'm not expert on yak bulls, so I don't know how much pheromonal stuff is going on. In beef bulls, very little has to do with pheromones. It's mostly visual. Bulls look for cows in heat. They look for the tail cock. They look for mucus drainage. They look for cows riding other cows. So if they don't have good eyes, their fertility will go down. Their effectiveness will go down in breeding cows. The other thing is leg structure. Of course, to do that, you know, I would have to depend on Greg to make sure that he's looked at leg structure. I call more beef bulls on poor leg structure than I ever do testicular problems or fertility issues. Because once, I mean, you know how these guys have sex. They're going to mount, he's going to thrust with his hocks and his stifles. And if he has very poor rear limb conformation, he may go for it, do pretty good for a couple of years for you. And after he starts developing some hock arthritis or stifle arthritis, you know, he'll get up on the first cow and he'll go, oh, this is fun, but wow, that really hurts. And now I'm going to go sit under the shade when he needs to be out breeding cows. So I look at those two things really hard. And again, with the yaks, I try to make this trip into this shoot as quick as possible for them. I know this is really stressful for them. So I want them to be in here, get what I need to get done or what Greg needs for me to get done, get them in, get them out, and back to a happier time when they're not confined. But I think leg structure, I think you have to really look at that pretty closely. So I try to sit down and figure out, well, what do I know? Do I know anything about yak bulls? And I've tried again to cobble some things together from what few papers are out there. And talking to my friend at Washington State, he gave me a couple of reference papers to look at. And so I kind of came to the conclusion that here's a few things that I think I know. I'm still not 100% sure, but I think I know some of these things. Puberty compared to our animals here, our beef animals, is pretty late, about 24 months of age. Sperm can be present anywhere between 1 and 2 years of age. And the thing you have to, and Dr. Lemkuehler, Michelle, both alluded to this. This is not so much genetic, I think, as and these papers were from, again, they were from China and India. The nutritional resources there are just not what they are here. They're not very good. And so puberty, if you look at puberty in beef animals is very closely related to weight, not age. So I could have a fairly young beef heifer that really weighs well and has good body condition. She's going to start cycling. And you can have an older one that has kind of poor body condition, and she'll be delayed. So it's much more related to how well conditioned, the body condition, how much fat's on the animal, as opposed to age. And so this makes some sense to me that data that comes out of those places are going to, I mean, these animals in Mongolia, where it's, you know, I don't know what kind of grass is in Mongolia, but there's probably not a lot of supplementation. They're going to be slower to reach puberty. The papers that I read said they generally don't turn bulls out much before they're 3, almost maybe 4 years of age to start breeding in a herd situation. Well, beef bulls are turned out as yearlings. And we sell Angus bulls here, and they go home at 12 months of age, 13 months, and they're out of the herd. I think it's nutritional, though. I think a lot of this is bearing on nutritional versus, you know, is there a genetic difference? They're seasonal breeders. I never realized that. There are horses are seasonal breeders, sheep and goats are seasonal breeders. Our cattle here, our domestic cattle here, pretty much breed all year round. So the yak, again, from my information, are seasonal breeders. They're most efficient, the bulls are most efficient, have higher semen quality in the late summer in the northern hemisphere. Most seasonal breeders are the seasonality is based on daylight. So like horses they're long day breeders. The longer the daylight, the more cyclicity they have. Sheep and goats are short day breeders. Their time of breeding, they're most fertile right now. The yaks seem to be kind of late summer. Seem like the most efficiency of their breeding was July, August, September. Scrotal size, it is smaller, okay, compared to beef or dairy bulls. But sure, yak bulls will have a smaller scrotal size. What does scrotal size have to do with anything? It actually is really important in cattle because it's highly heritable. So if you have a bull that has a big set of testicles, he's going to pass that trait along to his offspring. And what's really kind of neat, that has been known for decades now, is that a bull that has a big set of testicles, his daughters will be more highly efficient. They'll reach puberty sooner, they'll have more calves over their lifetime, they'll have more cycling over their lifetime. So the testicular size affects not only male offspring, if you're going to keep a bull, you know, a son of a bull to breed, but his heifers are going to be much better to breed. They're going to be more efficient. And again, I think this is probably really important for us to be gathering data here from North America, because I think we're going to find that there's a fair amount of difference between what where you have this limited resource stuff going on in Asia versus here, where we may have better grass, we may have more supplementation. Some of these parameters may be less. We may be able to reduce those just for feeding them better. What I don't know, everything else. I don't know what the normal scrotal circumference is of yaks. You know, what's normal, considered acceptable. Scrotal circumference is, and I'm going to show you a picture here, and it's basically just me taking a tape and measuring the circumference of their scrotum, or their circumference of their testicles. And it's been shown in dairy and beef bulls that the scrotal circumference is directly related to sperm concentration. So if you were to ask me, what is the best parameter to use, sperm parameter to use to measure the fertility of a male animal, any male animal, horse, dog, cat, yak, doesn't matter. What's the best parameter I can use to measure fertility? It's sperm concentration. How many sperm cells per cc of semen is in there? In most species that we deal with, we have swine here, so we have boars, we have horses, and we have cattle. Most of them we have to have a little machine. And we put a drop of semen in, and it tells us, it measures it, and it tells us what the concentration is. In bulls, we don't have to have a machine, we have scrotal circumference. The bigger the scrotum, the more concentrated their semen is. We know that that's a very linear relationship. So we don't have to have any fancy equipment. All I have to have is a tape, and I say, okay, we have to have minimums that we're going to meet. Anything below a minimum, we're going to eat them. Anything above the minimum, we can use for breeding. So I don't know what that is for the yak, and I can't find anybody else that knows that. And I've called around, I've tried to hunt around for any kind of data for that. So that's a great thing for us to look at, and I'm not sure that it would be that terribly difficult to start to obtain some baseline data for the scrotal circumference of yaks. Morphologic abnormalities, we'll talk a little bit about that, correlation, and then to correlate all these different things with pregnancy rates, because none of this stuff matters if, you know, it doesn't matter if all this stuff's great if they don't get the cows pregnant. So we need to correlate all that with how well does a big scrotum correlate with an increased pregnancy rate? How well does motility correlate with those things? So here's the delivery system of Ted's genetics, and the yak anatomy, I did read that the yak anatomy and bull anatomy is very close. So yak bulls have a penis that is made of cartilage. It's not it doesn't swell up like horses or humans or dogs. It doesn't swell up. It essentially is a piece of cartilage, and it has an S-shaped curve to it, so they get an erection by straightening the curve out. So if you straighten the curve out, it gets longer and it goes in the cow. This is called a sigmoid flexion. The testicles here go up. They have a small tube that goes up to the pelvic area. The semen that's going to be ejaculated into the cow is actually stored right there. So when a bull ejaculates into a cow, it doesn't come from all the way down here. There's a little warehouse of sperm right there. So when the bull ejaculates, it's going to go down through the urethra and out. Interesting about the penis of most bulls, and I'm going to take a stab and say the yaks might be similar. The glans penis of the bull has little receptors in it that are thermoregulated. They're thermal receptors. So they actually, if you ever watch a bull jump up, and I don't know how well you can do this in yaks because they have all that big, skirt of hair on them. If you ever watch beef bulls, they'll get up on the cow and they'll kind of poke around a little bit like, oh, there it is, and they're in. But what they're searching for is heat. There's actually thermal receptors. If you damage those thermal receptors, they'll be trying to breed the cow like 15 different places and they're not going to hit the right spot. So it's actually a pretty complicated little area along the penis. But this is all cartilage and it's just a matter of straightening it out. The yak bull does have some glands, and I always, as a part of the evaluation, so as part of the evaluation, I always palpate the testicles and make sure they feel normal. I palpate up underneath and make sure the penis feels okay. I do a rectal examination on most all bulls because there's some glands here. This is called a vesicular gland. This is actually just prostate. So bulls have prostates, and I'm going to palpate those and make sure they're all normal. These are all giving fluid. They're giving some good kinds of fluid to the semen sac. There's some glucose in there. There's some buffering systems in there. There's just some fluid in general to help it move on through the female's tract. So these are really important glands, and I palpate those. Sometimes they can get infected and dump a lot of pus and white blood cells. Pus and white blood cells do not go well with semen, so we want to make sure that that's treated if we do find those bulls, that's treated before we turn them out. Thermoregulation. This would be, I think, could be something very critical for yak bulls because of their tendency to have the amount of hair that they have. Sperm regulation, sperm production is regulated by temperature. I always tell the students, God made a scrotum for a reason because testicles need air conditioning. Testicles need air conditioning. Testicles operate about 4 degrees centigrade lower than body temperature. So that's so if the bull's normal temp is 102, the scrotum is about 98, okay, 97 degrees. There's some things that are part of the scrotum that make that thermoregulation work. There's a large muscle here called the cremaster, and I call it an elevator muscle. So if you go out today, if you went out today and looked at our little beef bulls down here, where are their testicles going to be? right up against their body wall, right? They're screaming, it's cold. Okay. What about August? Where were their testicles in August? Down around their hocks. You know, they're screaming, getting away from body heat. So these are really important. Look, there's a venous plexus here called the pampiniform plexus, and it actually cools the blood going into the testicle. We know that the testicle will not work right if it's not in the scrotum and not being cooled, because we have animals that sometimes have a retained testicle. They don't drop all the way down, and those testicles are non-functional. Now they still produce testosterone, they still produce the hormone, but they will not produce any sperm cells. They won't impregnate anything. So are bulls really, are yak bulls really prone to heat stress? Don't know. Would make some sense if they were. We kind of thought, we collected a few weeks ago, we collected some bulls, and we'd had a lot of heat here in Kentucky about 2 months before that, unusually hot, humid weather, and some of the sperm cells we got were not very good looking. So, you know, going back to it, we kind of attributed that to some heat stress. So fiscal exam, we talked about that. Scrotal, so this is the scrotal circumference. I grab the testicles. I usually try to place my hand around the front. Here's the tape. I'm going to get a measurement of his testicle circumference. Also, again, I want to feel the consistency. I want to make sure they're symmetric. These are highly heritable traits influencing male and female offspring. This is palpation of doing a rectal on the bull, just making sure those vesicles. But one of the things too that I'm doing here is just kind of desensitizing his rectum a little bit. I kind of get in there, I kind of go back and forth, do a little digital massage of that area. And actually, some of the young ladies that help me collect, he'll drip a little fluid out, a little pre-ejaculate fluid sometimes by doing that. You can, with great difficulty, you can actually sometimes get bulls to ejaculate a little bit of sperm just by doing manual massaging. There's a couple of issues with it though. It takes a long time, like 20-30 minutes to just be in there doing it. The other thing is that they will not extend their penis. And so here's the problem. If Doc says, I want you to go out and do a BSE, I'm planning on paying several $1,000s for a yak bull. I want you to go do a BSE on it. There's no way in the world I'm going to sign my name to that if I don't see his penis. Okay? Because he can have all the wonderful genetics in the world, but if he doesn't, if the delivery system's not working, it doesn't matter. Okay? So I don't prefer to do this, but it can be done with, I think, with great difficulty. So how are we going to get semen out of this bull, yak bull? The two ways that I'm aware of, one is through an artificial vagina. So this is just a tube, this is a rubber tube with a lining in it. You put water in it. Notice that this is not a yak bull, it's a beef bull. This is an animal that's been trained. It's actually probably a steer if you want to know the truth. It's probably a steer that's had a little estrogen given to it or something, or just trained to stand. And the bull will jump up, and then you have a collector that's putting the AV over the end of the penis, and the bull ejaculates into that. Well, obviously that's a more natural thing. You get really good samples with that. The data that I read on yak bulls was that they had collected, some guys from India had collected semen samples from bulls using an AV. I'm old, and I've had my first grandbaby, and I'm just not ready to sacrifice my body in my life yet to maybe get underneath a yak bull and try to collect semen. Now, some of these kids in here, they're probably pretty spry and have much better reflexes. I'm sure this is a highly trained situation. I'm just going to tell you, this is the way semen is collected in bull studs. So if you went to Select Sires in Ohio or ABS in Wisconsin, they collect semen this way, but these bulls are highly, highly trained to do this. So can you train your yak bull to do this? Well, I guess you can, but I'm not going to be the one that tells you exactly how to get that done. The other way to get it is through electroejaculation. And that's what we've done with Greg, with his bulls. And it seems to have gone pretty well up to this point, but again, we have a very, very small number of bulls to go off of. Because I guess he and I have not gotten to this point yet where we're wanting to get underneath the yak bull. So here's the electroejaculator. Now, the first time, I'm trying to be as transparent with you as I can. The first time I ever went to his farm and did this, he says, well, we really don't want to, you can't use an electroejaculator on a bull because you'll kill him. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, why am I here? So I was about ready to load up and go back home, and he says, well, let's go ahead and try it. So we tried it, and it worked out okay. You know, it worked out okay. We got a semen sample, and it was a little watery, but it worked out okay. And then he's been bringing them in here, and we've used it. We're going to do a little demonstration for you here real quick. The electroejaculator, I'm not throwing 25,000 volts into him. Okay, you gotta understand what's happening. I'm not just throwing electricity into his rectum. If you've ever been to a physical therapist and they ever put a TENS unit on your muscles and it does like that, this is a massaging of the ampullary glands inside his his pelvic area. All that thing is doing is it's massaging those two little glands right there. So it's more like this. It's not shocking. And I think that's where people get kind of the electroejaculator gets a bad rap. I'm using the smaller. This is something I would use on a beef bull. This is what I'm using on the yaks. So it's a relatively small probe. We're going to lube it up really good. We're going to put it in the rectum, put the tail between, and then I can kind of we can turn it on from there. The electroejaculator that I have has a step-up program. It's already programmed in. I like it. I can also use it where I dial it in. I can manually do that if I need to. The one that I use, I think the programmable aspect of it does a really good job, so I haven't really changed that. And you can see, so this is underbelly. He's got his penis protruded out. Everything looks really good there. They're got it down in the cup. We're collecting semen. And you can see that that's a relatively nice sample. It was a very concentrated sample of semen. And in fact, we got about 7 mLs there, and then we redid him again and got about 7 more. So we got about a total, within a half an hour's period of time, a total of 14 mLs of relatively concentrated sperm. Now, because of the heat issue, it was not good sperm cells. They were not very mobile, and they had a lot of abnormalities. Because about 2 months ago we had some really hot weather. I do motility on them. I'll kind of flip through this. This is normal sperm cell here. A sperm cell is a DNA vehicle. It's a DNA vehicle. The cargo's here. Ted's DNA that he's measuring for you. The single strand from the male is in that head. The thicker white piece here has a lot of mitochondria in it. It's kind of the engine. and then it has a long tail that has filaments, and it basically moves like a piston. So it makes the tail swim. And you need good, we're looking at progressive motility. So when I look at the slide, I'm looking at sperm that are going across the slide. If they're just sitting there doing this, that's not good motility. Or if they're just giving it a real, limp tail, that's not good. We want to see good progressive motility. Here's just some different abnormalities. These little droplets, they create some issues. These are all from beef bulls. I haven't had a chance to do enough yak bulls yet to know what predominantly their issues are. Curly Q tails, missing heads, missing tails. These are called piriform heads. They look like a balloon. Here's heads that have a divot in them. So any of those, these are not going to fertilize an egg. Okay, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for things that are not going to fertilize an egg. This is actually one that we did get from one of those bulls. That sample that I was showing you have a lot of heads and missing tails here. A lot of head abnormalities, some tail issues. But when we went back and looked, so it takes about 60 days for a sperm cell to be made. From the time it's a little cell until the time it's ready to fertilize, it's about a 60-day period. So if I see a lot of abnormalities, I don't necessarily say, well, what's wrong with the bull today? I'm really asking, Greg, what was wrong with the bull 60 days ago? And 60 days before this was 95-degree weather and 90% humidity for a stretch. I mean, we had some really nasty hot weather. This is from India, so here's just some, I put this in your paper just to kind of give you some normals. These are really pretty, these aren't too far off from what I consider normal for a beef bull. They're a little bit lower volume, a little bit lower per ejaculate. But again, based on the size of the testicles, I'm not really surprised. This sounds pretty consistent with what I would think. We want good progressive motility. We want 70% normal sperm cells. Let's see. Questions?